So to kick us off, I just introduced you and your companies, but I would love to learn a little bit more about your current roles at your companies and what you do.
Sure. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Brian Tubergen. I'm one of the founders of a company called Coinlist. Coinlist basically works with the top crypto companies on their token sales or ICOs. We help these companies raise money from thousands of investors online. In the future, we're going to be able to offer basic trading services like Coinbase, as well as other financial services like lending products, borrowing products, etc. So that's Coinlist.
Hey, I'm Lou Kerner with CryptoOracle. We're a crypto VC, so we invest in the companies that Coinlist lists. We believe that crypto is kind of the biggest thing to happen in the history of humanity. It's the next computing platform, and every new thing's the biggest thing because it's built on top of everything else.
Thanks so much. I'm Ben Nadareski with DrumG Technologies. We are a network builder and operator of capital market solutions, and we've launched an enterprise blockchain platform for the OTC market with 50% of the FX market globally with some of the top tier 1 institutions in the world. So we deal a lot with financial institutions and the intersection of innovative technologies with them.
Great, thank you. So to start out, I also would love to learn a little bit more about the three of you. So cryptocurrency, I would say, is still relatively new. And so I'd love to learn about when you first were interested in cryptocurrency. What piqued your interest? What was that first experience? And then how did you ultimately dive in?
Sure. So the first introduction to cryptocurrency for me was actually back in 2011. And this was right, I had a friend out in Berkeley, California, who I actually got introduced to a gentleman named Mike Hearn, if anybody's deep in the crypto space, if that name sticks. Mike Hearn now leading the Corda development over at R3, which was where I came from. And the crypto world, one of the biggest things that I realized really, really early on was the aspect of this anonymous transparency. It's a kind of an oxymoron, but it was an immediate recognition right off the bat that you would be able to participate in a financial inclusion system, be able to share your data, be able to transact, be able to handle financial market activity, but never be able to give up your data to somebody else, never have to be in a scenario where you feel as if you lost control of the things that you were most valuable for. And we've noticed that today with things like Facebook and a number of other companies that exploit you. They take your data, they sell it, and they've extracted that value out. And now everyone's just starting to realize, wait a minute, my data has worth. And I think Bitcoin was one of the first great examples of that worth being recognized back to the individual in the case of money.
Yeah, one of the great things about crypto is everybody has their story on how they, as I refer to it, see the crypto light. And I joke that I actually went down the rabbit hole in 1314 long enough that the Wall Street Journal wrote a story on Bitcoin quoting me in the story as Wall Street's Bitcoin expert. But I joked that I looked at the light and I looked at the light, but I did not see it. It was very dim then, and it's actually still very dim. But in June 29th, 2017, I held a conference call because the ICOs were going crazy. I didn't understand what they were. And I had 4 folks on the call, world experts in ICOs, and somebody on the call said something, and that was the piece I was missing. I thought of the crypto light. I was in a manic state for 3 months, and I would write every week. I'm a former Wall Street analyst. I write to learn, and after 3 months, I put all my thoughts together in a thought piece called 7 Thoughts on Crypto After 3 Months Down the Rabbit Hole. And that was the most read piece on Medium in crypto for 3 days, after which I was the 3rd most influential blogger in the world, which proved my first of the 7 thoughts is that nobody knows anything. And that's where we are in crypto. Really, nobody knows anything other than it's going to change the world in amazing ways and make the world a better place for lots of people.
I think the first time I seriously looked at Bitcoin was in 2011, 2012. I know in 2012 I was a student at Princeton and I took a information security class, and we talked a lot about Bitcoin, although to me at the time it was just one technology among many that seemed pretty interesting. So I actually didn't buy very much Bitcoin at the time, didn't get rich. Meanwhile, my friends are mining on the Princeton computers or whatever. And I mean, some of them lost their passwords to their Coinbase accounts or their wallets or whatever. So none of us got rich. But then in 2017, ICO started to become a really big deal. And my attention was piqued again because what I noticed is that a lot of these companies were basically raising online. from thousands of investors in a way that probably wasn't legally compliant and having pretty massive operational hassles doing so. And at the time, I was working at a company called AngelList, and one of AngelList's businesses is helping companies raise money online from thousands of investors. And so on my team, we basically built a product to help a company called Protocol Labs run a sale for their coin called Filecoin. They raised $200 million, and we made a few $1 million, and all the top crypto companies started approaching us. And at that point, I started to get more interested in it, started to read a lot more about these companies, and I've been working in the space ever since.
Great, thank you guys. So Lou, you just mentioned that we're still at the very nascent stages. We still have a lot to learn. I'm sure that we have some crypto diehards in the audience, but I'm assuming that some of us are somewhat newbies here as well. And I actually think cryptocurrency is one of those terms that's tossed around where people think they have an understanding of exactly how it works and what it is, and they really don't. So how would you describe cryptocurrency to a kindergartner?
For the most part, I look at cryptocurrency the same way I look at frequent flyer miles, in that you can actually buy frequent flyer miles with money or sell them for money if you want to. But what they really are at their core is an incentivization mechanism that the airlines use to get you to fly with them more often. And what ultimately most cryptocurrencies are going to be incentivization mechanisms to get the community members to give value to the community that, in the whole will create value for everybody.
Interesting. Great, thank you.
So a kindergartner might understand that. I
might
don't know.
understand that, yeah. Great. So today, I think a big part of the cryptocurrency conversation is regulation. We're kind of past the wild, wild west of cryptocurrency, and we're coming into a state now where the SEC is heavily involved. We have companies like Basis who raised $133 million and then gave back much of that capital to their investors after they realized they couldn't actually bring their dream to life with regulation as it is today. We also have companies like Block One who just came to a settlement with the SEC for $24 million. So I'm curious to get your thoughts. Where is there a disconnect today between regulation, between the SEC and cryptocurrency companies out there? And what needs to be done to improve conversation between the two parties?
Yeah, first I find the Block One fundraise really funny because they were fined roughly $20 million, but they raised $4.1 billion.
Exactly.
So to me that looks like a pretty good deal. But in all seriousness, I think the issue for a lot of companies on the regulatory side is just the fact that there's a lack of clarity in terms of how to conduct these fundraisers in a legally compliant way. And I actually think at this point that issue has mostly been figured out for the companies that want to be compliant. A lot of companies don't want to be compliant, and so they're raising internationally, and that's their choice. And then going forward, I think there's still a number of issues on this topic of securities and what makes a cryptocurrency a security and when it's okay to sell that cryptocurrency to an ordinary individual. There's a lot of questions here. I feel like the whole securities token space has been a little bit dead on arrival, and I think the reason is because there haven't been exchanges that are able to list the securities tokens, so there's no way to buy and sell these things. And so a lot of people are choosing not to create them, and a lot of entrepreneurs are probably not even considering going into the cryptocurrency industry seriously due to the lack of clarity around these things. They'll choose to pursue a more traditional business. So I think on the topic of what is a security and what is not a security, and when a cryptocurrency is and is not a security, a lot more clarity there will go a long way towards helping companies and leading to more innovation in the space.
Definitely agree on the ICO front. One of the things we've seen across the cryptocurrency and blockchain space was one consistent theme in the early hype cycle. It was technology first, solution second. And so when you think about that, everyone was pushing for blockchain to be integrated everywhere. It was going to solve world hunger. It was going to do everything in between. It was going to fix the financial system. But the thing is, everyone immediately expected every single industry to take this vertical leap of faith to this completely new system that nobody's vetted out yet. And so on the ICO front, that completely agree. You're absolutely right. And then when it comes to the actual integration of crypto into institutional investment accounts, ETF approvals, some of the big hot topic items that you'll see across the Wall Street Journal, for example, the main thing with these is that people have not considered the same regulatory path that other financial products have gone through. There's a lot of ugly, boring sides to the financial services industry that nobody likes to talk about. The compliance, the regulations on the back end, the vendor onboarding approvals for making sure that investor accounts are doing their due diligence, and everything in between. And we're seeing this firsthand, actually. So I sit on as an officer for the Blockchain Association of New Jersey, and we're actively helping shape the bill for digital assets and how New Jersey looks at it. And their first and foremost concern is the scams that are immediately coming out because nobody did the basic vetting. There's ATMs of Bitcoins on the street that people are just no idea what happens in that little Pandora's box. And they're not regulated, and they're not going through the same hurdles. So there's this huge disconnect in mind where this whole community came about, which I was a part of very heavily, and I am now, that people forgot all of those boring steps to make sure that we're actually doing something that's trustworthy and doing something that the financial system can rely on.
Yeah, I'll just say, I have the good fortune of being able to spend a little bit less time thinking about regulations. You can't be an expert on everything, and regulations is its own massive rabbit hole. But my basic belief is that the regulators have two choices. They can roll out the red tape, or they can roll out the red carpet. And they roll out the red tape at their peril because the genie has left the bottle. And this is happening, and the countries that enable this in a smart way, shouldn't just be the Wild West, obviously, but who do it in a smart way are going to be very advantaged. And there's certainly, I agree, a lot of people who would otherwise be in crypto aren't in crypto in the U.S. But in my view, the far more important thing or more interesting thing is, I've been spending a lot of time lately in Asia, and I run into tons of Americans who moved to Asia, who moved to Hong Kong, who moved to Shanghai, who moved to Taipei or in Singapore to do this, because they can do this in a way and take advantage of this thing that's happening in a massive way already in Asia.
Yeah. So going back to basis a little bit, do you think that it will ever be possible for us to have a stable cryptocurrency? So oftentimes people talk about the difficulty if you were to be paid in a cryptocurrency is that it fluctuates pretty heavily. And so if I were to get my salary in a cryptocurrency, I may not be able to pay my rent next month. Is that vision something that you think can actually happen?
Yeah, we actually already have that. So the easiest way to create a stable cryptocurrency is for you to give me $1, and then for every dollar, I stick it in a bank account, and I mint you a cryptocurrency. And so a lot of these so-called stable coins like USDC or the Gemini dollar, there's several of these, True USD. These are stable coins, and they work pretty well. What they are not, and what Basis was trying to be, is a decentralized stablecoin. So the idea that you can have something which is stable in value, but isn't dependent on any third-party institution, any real-world entity. And that, I honestly thought Basis was the best thing that, of the ideas out there, Basis was the best idea that I saw. In practice, we're never going to get to see if it works unless someone tries to take Basis's idea and launch it internationally, simply because they decided that they couldn't really launch their idea in a way that was consistent with the U.S. regulation.
I find the stablecoin concept very oxymoronic. I always have from day one. One of the major reasons why is there's a trust issue. There's volatility issues, even with stablecoins across the board that we've seen, that you can put money into the USDT, you can put a USDC, all these coins and go into it, and there's still fluctuating prices on a one-to-one backed currency. You have no idea what's going on behind the scenes and how that actually works. We're still going through the adoption phase of getting able to go to the Bitcoins, the Ethereums, the Litecoins, the major currency backs, right? Yeah. And there's going to be those cryptocurrency exchanges that utilize the stable coins for strategic purposes. But for the general population, I don't think that's going to be the primary spearhead. I don't think that's what's going to break the glass ceiling for us in crypto. I think honestly what's going to break it, and I hate to say it, and yes, it's a wolf in sheep's clothing, and yes, it's not decentralized, but it's aspects like Libra. Because what that does is it raises the whole bar of the industry up to the forefront of our conversation. Facebook has a reach that nobody else does across the world, and they're going to be able to raise that conversation up, and we're going to actually start to see this glass ceiling be broken and see a quote-unquote sort of stable coin, Libra, be able to be utilized in very tangible ways. And then that will kind of dictate how we utilize stable coins in the more niche cases.
Yeah.
Just in terms of, before going to Libra, which is obviously certainly very interesting, on the stable coin front, in the 2.5 years now that I've been doing this 24/7, the most mind-blowing thing like that happened that just really, wow, this really is a thing, is when this is, he was saying Tether, this new coin started, and basically their deal was you gave them $1, they put the dollar in a bank, and they'd issue you a Tether dollar, and it worked, and it's quickly became the most traded coin because everybody trades into Tether and then out of Tether, and then one day it came out they only had 75 cents on the dollar in the bank, and nobody cared. Nobody cared. It still traded at $1. Nobody could care less, because at the end of the day, regardless of what it is and where it is, at the end of the day, all it is faith. And the community wants to have faith in $1. The community needs $1 that they can go back and forth in to facilitate everything else. And so everybody in the community is fine having it be $1. And that's the amazing thing about this. And at the end of the day, that's all Bitcoin needs to be, a massively bigger thing, is the more people who have faith in it, the bigger thing it's going to be, and every day more people are having faith in it.
Great.
And by the way, Libra, in my view, is DOA. It's the regulators are not going to allow. The problem is innovation today generally is not done by people who ask for permission.
Agreed. So Ben, at DrumG, you work with a lot of enterprises to bring the distributed ledger to an enterprise. And then Brian, you're seeing a lot more entrepreneurial teams kind of use distributed ledger to ICO and kind of bring it to life from more of an entrepreneurial standpoint. I'm interested from the two of you to hear the difference between what that process looks like on an enterprise level versus a startup level.
I think I begin a little quickly here. It's in the enterprise side, which is really funny. Our key tagline and what we present to all the banks, and it's on our website, the first line, it's your data, you should own it. And it's a wild concept to pitch to a financial institution, because we think of them as the bad guys, either stealing our data or caking our fees and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, the same exploitation that's occurring to the retail level, to us from big data companies and so on and so forth, it's happening at the capital markets level too. Their data is being reused. They send it to Bloomberg, IDC, ICE, IHS Market, and then they take that data. They do not have the rights of the aggregated insights to post it. And so we've created a model for the banks to actually get engaged and actually own that data set. So the transparency, the data ownership, I think, is the similarity between the two sides of retail and enterprise. And the major difference is that I have to go through hundreds of thousands of questionnaires and vendor onboarding and InfoSec and OPSEC and all these requirements and approvals to actually get this application up and running. It's a wild concept when you hear live production often in the enterprise blockchain space, and it's just simply not true. Still to this day, there's not one enterprise blockchain application that is launched within financial markets that is truly live and producing business value to the end user yet. We've seen that across the board. Every single bank we work with has said, even to us, nobody has gotten to this point yet. And the reason being, it's just a level of maturity. We're still going to get there, and we're on our way, and that should not be discouraging. It's just we had such a big hype cycle that now everyone's expecting the world, and it's like this is just another technology stack to be integrated into the full stack of the financial institution building. So that's what I'm seeing.
Julia, what was the question?
So more from a startup standpoint, if you're a startup team trying to build a cryptocurrency using a distributed ledger, how does that look different than if you're trying to bring a distributed ledger to an enterprise?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think it really depends on what the company is trying to do. I mean, if you're going to be in the financial services space, you definitely still have to go through all the regulatory hoops that Ben mentioned. There's no getting around that. I mean, my company in particular, it's registered as a money services business. We're setting up a broker-dealer. Granted, we're not a blockchain company per se, but the difference is subtle and a bit nuanced. It really depends on what you're doing. On the other hand, I mean, there are blockchain companies that are operating in unregulated spaces, in which case it's much more like a consumer internet startup. Move fast, break things, try to iterate as fast as possible, learn from customers, etc. I mean, the thing that might be a little nuanced about the blockchain space is, like Lou was mentioning, you have a choice as an entrepreneur. You can basically set up shop in the US and have to adhere to the US regulatory regime, or you can go to Asia and potentially have a lot less onerous regulatory requirements. And I agree with Lou. I think a lot of top entrepreneurs are going to do that, and I think they're already doing it, and I think you're going to see a lot more interesting projects come out of Asia in the future.
And Berlin.
Yeah.
I wanted to add, that's exactly the whole point around this digital asset bill for New Jersey is exactly that point. We don't want people taking their business elsewhere.
Right.
Here's a pitch for New Jersey. We want to bring them in. We want to make it inclusive. And that's why we're creating these digital asset laws specifically for that, because we're seeing this exodus out, especially out of New York State, because of the New York State bit license, which is horrific.
Yeah.
So
All
now,
you have to do then is secede from the union, and you're good.
so looking into the future, what's most exciting about cryptocurrency, the cryptocurrency space?
what's most exciting about the cryptocurrency space? I think there's one big point, which I mentioned earlier. It's the data ownership. People are going to start to recognize the value that your individual person, your individual ownership of your financial health, your financial control, once that starts to get realized, people are going to be like, why hasn't this been my entire life? Why haven't I had the control and transparency over this my entire life? It's going to be one of those things that you don't quite know that you need until later on. And we're seeing that especially on the blockchain side, on the financial institutions for them. So one of the big things is if you were the CEO of Pepsi and I asked you how much inventory you have in Manhattan, you're going to be able to tell me a pretty good answer and tell me right off the bat. This is something that's tracked, something that's right off the bat. But in financial services, things are much more opaque and there's much more dark corners and everything. If you asked who are the top 3 FX players in the world, you'd have 7 banks saying it's me. So there's these transparency pockets which we want to be able to open up across the board. So there's the data ownership piece, which I think cryptocurrency and blockchain are really going to bring and push forward. And then there's also the transparency aspect, which is going to really overhaul things and make sure that events like the 2008 crash don't occur again, for example. Hopefully.
Yeah, like Ben, I'm pretty bullish on innovation in financial services. I think there's an opportunity for blockchain, like Ben mentioned, to bring a lot of transparency to the space, automate a lot of compliance stuff, which honestly is just overhead today. And I think you're going to increasingly see things in the financial space, such as securities, become programmable. And I think that's going to unleash a whole wave of innovation from entrepreneurs. It's going to take time to get there, though, because as I mentioned previously, there needs to be a lot more regulatory clarity in terms of how you can actually develop blockchain security for that to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think the kind of the moment in time we're at now is this. I compare it to the start of television, in that the very first TV shows were literally, people sitting at a desk with a microphone going, "Hey, now we're on television," right? They didn't know any better but to put radio on television, and that's really all we're doing now. Is we're taking, non-digital assets and we're making them digital assets, which at the moment, it's just creating more friction, because nobody knows what to do with the token and how to custodian it. And but what's really exciting is with these new technologies, what a security can be, and all the innovation that's that is going to come is going to be amazing.
Yes. Great. So we have about 2 minutes for questions now. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yep.
So there's different other parts of the world they use financial services using cell phones, flip phones. So what about when there's no electricity or internet connection? How are you going to make a transaction? Like, what do you guys think about it? I know it.
Like in a post-apocalyptic scenario?
Let's say right now,
I mean,
Con Ed explodes or something, and then there's no electricity. There's no. How are we going to trade? I'm just saying, what do you guys think?
I mean, I would say with the same, to be blunt, I don't mean to marginalize anything. I think there would be the same concerns across the financial services today. I think an electricity outage across the board would.
Let's say I have
The cash, physical cash aspect of it. You got us there. There's no electricity in an entire country, and there's no aspect of any digital beings whatsoever. Actually, there's one little point to that. I've seen there was a recent article, somebody out of a ham radio was able to do a Bitcoin transaction by translating binaries across from 2 ham radios and actually translate it. So, yes, it is possible, and Bitcoin will always prevail, and it'll be there either way, no matter what happens.
We really are. There are multiple companies that are working on doing satellite rings, And so you will be, if you can communicate with the satellite, obviously you need to have some kind of power to do that. But I think that's one of the more interesting ways to circumvent any particular government from shutting down the internet.
And for what it's worth, you won't always have to be connected to the internet, at least. There will be ways to transact with a cryptocurrency offline and then only later rectify it to the online ledger once your device comes back online. So there will be mechanisms to do that.
Great. Yeah.
Again, I think we have to believe in something, right? You can't believe, there are some anarchists or whatever, but generally, and what the world believes today largely is the dollar, right? And even though, how many dollars are we printing today? Nobody has any idea. All we know is it's a lot, and it's going to be a lot more tomorrow. And they're never going to pay it back, obviously. But that's all we can have faith in. So the question is are there other systems that it might make people to have faith in? And actually, the thing that I like about it the most, I just want to know what the rules are, right? Tell me what the rules are, and most people want that. Tell them what the rules are, and we can all figure out how to operate. But they don't tell us what the rules are, or if they do, they change them, or they're lying about them because they're solving for them. And that's the capitalism we have now. What these tools enable, I think, is a fair, better capitalism.
Also, I think the other point, what disintermediates some of the faith comparatively to the Great Depression in the cryptocurrency world, there is a concept of code is law. There is a concept, it's not total truth, and there will never be total truth, but there's a validity in saying there's a 51% rule of how the network works, how the transitions, how the decisions are made. It's a democratic system among everybody that's participating for a reason, because it's abstracted from a single entity that controls the decision making. It's abstracted from a single entity with a huge wallet making all the decisions for the world. Despite the recent Litecoin crash because of Craig Wright, but I won't go into that. The other thing is when we talk about the governance in these networks specifically, you have this code base that you're able to reference. It's transparent, and what you see is what I see. It's what everybody here sees, what everybody in the audience sees, what everybody in the world will see. And that transparency kind of disintermediates that faith a little bit, so it wouldn't allow for those things like the Great Depression.
Great.
In the same dynamic.
We have to wrap it up because we've gone a little over. But Ben, Lou, and Brian, thank you so much for coming today. Thank you, everyone.